In this example, you're asked to graph the following hyperbola, find the foci and the asymptotes. So we have 4x squared minus 9y squared plus 24x plus 18y plus 18 equals 0. What's the problem? It's not in standard form. In order to be in standard form, it has to look like one of these two forms. Let's go ahead and group the powers of x together. What would that get me? 4x squared plus 24x. And then let's group the powers of y together. So I took care of this guy, and I took care of this guy. Let's group the powers of y together. What do we have? Minus 9y squared plus 18y. So I took care of that guy, and I took care of that guy. And then what do we do with the constant? It's probably best just to get it to the other side, subtract it. Okay, what do I need in front of both the x squared and the y squared? I need a 1. So let's work on 4x squared plus 24x. What could I do to it to get a 1 in front of the x squared? Yeah, at least inside parentheses, I could factor out a 4. Well, I mean, what I mean is, at least inside the parentheses, when I factor out a 4 from just these two terms, I'll have a 1 in front of the x squared inside the parentheses. So factor out the 4, get x squared plus, okay, take a 4 out of 24x, what do you get? 6. What if it were 25? Then you would just take, in this case it's 24. In this case, you would just write it as a fraction, right? Whatever the number is divided by the thing you factored out times x. And I show you that because 4 doesn't have to be a factor of that x term in order to factor it out of both of those terms. You just use that trick. Of course, what is 24 divided by 4? 6. So in this case, it'd be silly to write it that way. But if it were 25, writing it as 25 over 4 would be the best way to write it. In other words, if the 24 were 25. So I'm going to rewrite it as x squared, 4 on the outside, times the quantity, x squared plus 6x. Leave some space to complete the square. And then if you want, you can just focus on the x terms, and we'll come back and focus on the powers of y. So how do we complete the square then? Take half the coefficient of 6, which is what? Write it down. When it's a plus right here, write down plus, and then half the coefficient of 6 is 3. Write down that plus 3 on the line below it. And then what do you do with that plus 3? Square it and add it, right? So you square it and add it inside the parentheses, and that completes the square. But what did you really add? You really added 36, so you got to add 36 to the other side. Before you forget, do it right away. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's do the powers of, oh, by the way, then what does that factor to be? X squared plus 6x plus 9? So that's why you write down the plus 3 then. All you got to do is put the x in front of it, square it, and then don't forget the 4 carries down. Does that make sense? Let's do the same thing on minus 9y squared plus 18y. We need a 1 in front of y squared, so what do I factor out of those two terms? Not 9, but minus 9, and put that operation in front as a minus. And then what's left? Y squared minus 2y, because you factored out a minus 9, right? Okay, notice what I'm doing here. I'm leaving room to complete the square. Or you could just not even write down the right parenthesis right now. Just leave it like that if you wanted to. Okay, complete the square on y squared minus 2y. What do you do first? Take half the coefficient of y, which is what? Don't say 1. Include the sign. So minus 1, write down a minus 1 right below it. And then what do you do with the minus 1? You square it and add it. But you're adding it inside the parentheses now, aren't you? So what are you really, you're not really adding 1. What are you really doing? You're really subtracting 9, aren't you? So what do you have to do to compensate? Subtract 9 to the other side to balance it out. Okay, then what does y squared minus 2y plus 1 factor to be? y minus 1, the whole thing squared, right? Don't forget the 9 is in front. Don't forget the operation is minus between the two terms on the left side. Okay, and then what do we get on the right side? So it's if you add in reverse order or in non left to right order, you get negative 18 minus 9 is negative 27, right? Plus 36? 9. Everybody good? We're not quite in standard form. What do we need to do? We need a 1 on the right side, so we divide everything by 9. Like that. So how would we rewrite the first term on the left side so that it's in standard form? Good, yeah. So in order for it to be in standard form, you need x plus 3 quantity squared by itself on top, right? But it's being multiplied. Everybody look up at the screen. It's being multiplied by 4/9, isn't it? So there's a trick here. If you want to figure out what the denominator is, then what's equivalent to multiplying by 4/9? Dividing by 9/4. You're used to that trick in the reverse direction, right? But multiplication by 4/9 is division by 9/4. Just like division by 9/4 is really multiplying by 4/9. So the way you could rewrite this first term then is to take the x plus 3 quantity squared and divide it by 9/4. Does that seem reasonable to you? It might be the first time you've ever seen that trick, but it should make sense because division by 9/4 is the same as multiplication by 4/9. You're just going in the reverse order from what you're used to. Should still work though. Okay, minus what? Minus y minus 1 quantity squared over 1, so I won't even write it, equals 1. So there you go. There's your standard form.